Okay, Barbara, start.
Welcome to Conversations with Barbara. I'm Barbara Canelopoulos. Every day we're bombarded with from a variety of sources, lots of information, and it's very hard to know how to deal with it, how to evaluate it. With me today is Alan Russell, who is the production and education manager here at Falmouth Community Television, and he's here to help us make sense of this flood of information and to give us some guidelines, a way to evaluate it. Welcome to the program, and thank you so much for coming here to talk about this overload of information and what we can do about it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Barbara. It's such a great topic, and it's so timely as well.
Yeah, particularly what concerns us too is knowing how to sort out from useful information and stuff that is just there to distract us or to confuse us. Do you have some guidelines?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best things we can do is to just slow down and to analyze carefully the information, and then to look at the source and to see if we can tell where it's coming from. So with images, we can do a reverse image search, and you can do this with videos as well. If you take a screenshot of a video, you can upload that to a reverse image search, and it will help you to determine where that originally came from.
So you're suggesting that some of the images we see on television are not original, that they have been sort of worked on and manipulated?
Oh, absolutely. We see this all the time. This is much more common online, where people are photoshopping and manipulating images. And you'll see this on social media, but it's also happening literally on broadcast television.
Really?
We've seen it where they'll actually manipulate two different images and overlay them to give a different appearance to a story. So one example would be the protests in Oregon. During COVID, we had all the different protests going on up there, and you had the free zone in Portland.
Yes.
And Fox News took different images from different protests to put them together and then aired them as part of that segment. Now, these images weren't even from Portland, and so what they were depicting was not what they were discussing. And so this is a very common, you'll see this all the time, even in trusted sources like the New York Times and the Washington Post.
Oh, you mean it's being done by all sides?
Right, and it's not always being done maliciously. A lot of times it's being done, you need to cover a protest that's going on in Tripoli or in Egypt, right? You may not have a reporter on the ground there today, so you may not have images from the protests that you're talking about. So they'll often use previous images from prior events. But what we are missing out on there is that we're not being given the full picture, right?
Yes, yes.
And things could be very different. Crowd sizes, slogans, all sorts of different things could be very different from what's being portrayed.
Yeah. So it makes one wonder what the goal is of news sources. It may not just be information, it may be also entertainment or a means to keep people watching and reading.
Right, that started really with the 24-hour news cycle, where you needed people, with cable television in the 80s, CNN came on and had 24 hours to fill now all of a sudden, rather than, your 1 hour nightly news broadcast, right? So now you got 23 extra hours of stuff that you need to put out there. And that's really how it kind of became an entertainment driven, and really with the explosion of 60 Minutes actually becoming a profitable news program, showed the rest of the industry that, hey, we can lean into the profit side of this. And then you started to see more advertisers get involved and more stations try to turn their news programs into profit-driven programs.
Yes. And always then the original event is then reinterpreted by the news folk and presented not just because it's got an argument or something to say, but presented because it's more interesting, more newsworthy.
Yeah, absolutely. They find new ways to try and grab our attention. So you'll see breaking news all the time for a number of different stories, whether the story is breaking or not. A lot of the times they're just using that to try and grab your attention and get you to watch more. And it goes into our brain's reward system where we're anticipating something with this.
Excited.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes. So what is to be done? What, as viewers, what shall we beware of?
So as viewers, we need to be an active audience and not just passively watching and listening and absorbing what they're telling us, right? We need to think for ourselves and think about, why are they saying this? Does this make sense?
Yes.
And then we have to also follow up. So a lot of what news is about is not just reporting the story at first, but then to follow up on it with subsequent reports. And a lot of times that's the stuff we miss because we catch when it's breaking news and it's just coming out. But a lot of times they get the facts wrong in those instances. And it's those subsequent reports that actually clean everything up. And by not following those, we're missing out and we're being misinformed.
We're being misinformed, actually, yes. And many of us don't have the time to put into deep research, but at least we should be very aware of bias or that even the picture has been doctored.
Right.
And so I guess we really need to be critical and be critical thinkers, critical readers. And sometimes you've spoken about pictures, images. How about text? Sometimes when we are tuned in to a panel discussion, there's always the impression that those individuals have done some research and are coming out with important information, and that may not be the case.
Right, absolutely. And even the experts that they bring on, for example, with the election claims that are really popular right now, bringing on a pillow salesman as a election expert, automatically you're wondering, where are the credentials, right?
Yeah.
But even with some of the people that have credentials, a lot of times with the coronavirus, right?
Yeah.
During the pandemic, we saw doctors, practicing physicians telling us contradictory things on television, right? If you were watching OAN or Fox or something like that, you may have heard one side, but if you were watching MSNBC or CNN, you would have heard a completely different tale from the doctors on there. And now that there's no fairness doctrine or equal time, they don't have, each network doesn't have to have those two, debate each other and actually get to the facts.
Yes, yeah.
And a lot of the reason why they got rid of that was because companies weren't doing this in good faith. They would get the most outrageous person on the other side to come in and debate and make that side look ridiculous.
I see, yes, right. And so you're suggesting that before we had this, well, with the, we don't have the fairness doctrine, or that fairness doctrine introduced the, let's go back to that concept, the fairness, that was a FCC ruling?
Yes, so that was originally put in place to design a way that we could keep the news from becoming a partisan landscape like it has become, right? Because we did away with the fairness rule. But the problem that they noticed with it and why they changed that and got rid of it was because these companies were not acting in good faith.
I see, I understand.
And so it wasn't doing what it was designed to do. But now companies have just taken it to the extreme. Well, we don't even need that person anymore, so now we can say whatever we want because there's no one to refute it.
Yes. Do you suppose then talk radio was not really as, well, did we have that?
We did not have talk radio as we know it before this. We certainly had public radio,
yes.
And a lot of informational programs like that, but we didn't have, the rise of these one-sided talk
right.
radio stations, and just the proliferation of all of this news, so-called, out there.
Yeah. So it makes it really incumbent upon us to be really careful about what we're believing, being very careful when we watch, and being analytical. And I suppose what is making things even more difficult is the progress that artificial intelligence has been making with some of these chat programs. Tell us what we can expect to encounter there.
Yeah, AI has become a revolutionary new tool in the marketplace. It's driving a lot of the algorithms that are driving content out on a number of different platforms. And really, as far as media organizations go, they have to become able to adapt to this new technology or be left behind. It's not something that we're going to be able to ignore, and it's becoming it's really evolving much more rapidly than I think anybody ever predicted. We've seen ChatGPT-3 release and go public earlier this year, and they've already released ChatGPT-4 now, which can do images. And so the AI evolution, as we use it more and more, it's becoming smarter and smarter, but it's also becoming less well-informed because of its interactions with us.
Right. In other words, although for lots of people in their daily work, it's very useful to be able to turn to this to get some text that's already pre-written, and most of it is in very good English prose, so that can be useful, but it is dangerous. By the way, I think let's define algorithm for our viewers so that people will understand that this is the underlying source of artificial intelligence.
Right, so the algorithms that drive each platform are very unique. Everyone has, patented and copywritten their specific coding for all of these different algorithms. The most powerful one, or the most addictive algorithms, are the ones that tend to win in the marketplace because they get us addicted to our devices and that app. And so everybody is trying to emulate the TikTok algorithm right now. Right. And essentially what that is the algorithm takes what you watch or what you view and all sorts of other data about you as an individual, and then it recommends the next video or the next thing that you're going to want to watch. Right. And this is actually really contentious right now and is being heard by the Supreme Court in the Gonzalez v. Google case, which is regarding YouTube and their recommendation of ISIS terrorist videos.
Yes.
Which, certainly YouTube, Twitter, all these companies are making plenty of efforts to remove this content from their platforms because they don't want it either. Sure. But these organizations are still going to use it to get their message out. And the problem is, where the court case comes in, is it's the algorithm that is recommending more and more radicalized content to individuals, because the algorithm doesn't care about truth. The algorithm cares about emotions and reactions. And what's going to get the most emotion and reaction is angry content or fake content, oftentimes.
So if you are coding and you are creating an algorithm, is it oversimple to say that that algorithm is like a recipe? For example, it's a set of directions.
It's more similar to the AI in a sense, because rather than a set of set directions, the algorithm learns and grows over time.
I see.
Much like the AI or regular intelligence, right? As we grow and get
I
older,
see.
we get wiser and
All right,
and
so it's a set of concepts.
exactly.
A set of concepts that are put together, and it selects from information
Right.
what its purpose is, so that if it wants to titillate or excite, it will select concepts that do that.
Exactly. And that's why data privacy is so important, and that's why it's something that we should be talking more about with all of these apps. We've recently had the TikTok hearings in Congress, and a lot of what they were talking about is how our teens are using it, and people are getting addicted, and it's hurting our attention spans. But what we're missing is the data privacy side, which, it being run by the Chinese Communist Party, or at least them being on the board, has been, very questionable for it to be here in America. But we also don't think about Facebook and Google and how much privacy and information we're giving them.
Oh, exactly.
Just because they're here in America.
Exactly.
But they have just as much power from all of that information that they could, absolutely shift people and radicalize them into, acting differently.
Now, you have just completed your graduate studies in media literacy. Is there some information we should have, particularly parents, who, because of the tremendous amount of time that young people are spending on social media, and some information about what we know that is causing?
Absolutely. So the newest information out on all of this is that social media is very, very harmful to children. What we've seen from Instagram and other studies is that the self-image of these teenagers and children that are using this platform, their anxiety goes up, depression goes up, heart rate goes up, blood pressure. And you think about it, when you're on your phone, it's a very sedentary activity. We become more disconnected from everyone in society. And so what the recommendations are is don't give your children a phone. Don't let them on social media. There's a reason why in China, TikTok is only allowed to be used 1 hour per day by the children. There's very strict limits on it. Because they're worried about this effect that it has on their youth. And I think here in America, we would never, governmentally do something like that. But I think it's up to each parent to set these limits and to carefully monitor their kids' screen time. Because you don't know what they're watching. And if you let them get onto these social media platforms, you're letting them give all of this information out into the world that they're never going to be able to claw back.
We really ought to be giving young people the tools so that they will be their own critical thinkers. For example, we could have high school courses in media, serious courses in media literacy. Do you think that would be a good idea?
I think that's imperative. I think just as we've been teaching regular literacy for so long, it's very rare that people will actually pick up and read a book anymore. We've already kind of started to phase out cursive, and that certainly gives me pause about being able to read firsthand accounts from
diaries.
Exactly. But I think media literacy has become even more important. And as we've started to digitize a lot of these old records as well, it becomes more apparent to us that we need to know, is that a real digitized version, or is this some fake diary that someone's posted, right? Is it the real diary of Anne Frank, or is it some, other publication that claims to be the diary of Anne Frank?
Now this, for our whole understanding of how we acquire knowledge, is very important. This is serious. It's frightening.
Right. This is a lot of why this misinformation and fake news and everything's out there is to create confusion and doubt in everyone's mind. and start to make you think that there is no such thing as truth. And so that when you're presented with provably knowable information, like the Earth being round,
Yes.
we all of a sudden start to doubt that, and then you start to get like-minded people together that then can find more information and create more stuff on their own to counter the main narrative.
Yeah. I'm beginning to think that this postmodern culture is pretty close to dystopia.
It certainly seems like it's headed that way. But there's also a lot of benefits that we've seen from all of this. We've trained AI and technology to become better at detecting cancers than we ever could. It's really great at picking out patterns.
Yeah.
And it can really, I think it would be hard to find someone nowadays who would want to go back to the world without internet. Right? Because it's just we've been able to look things up, and we've been able to connect with everybody instantly. And it's made our lives so much better and easier in some ways. But in other ways, we've certainly seen the dystopian side as well.
Right, right. Well, it seems to me that with what you have been saying, that there is a way that we can balance, that we can find balance. But I want to go back to a critical thing that you said. We have to be active listeners, not simply receiving information, but working with it, thinking about it, questioning it, perhaps not becoming cynical about everything, but being somewhat skeptical about the information that we're taking in.
Right. We've almost become nihilistic in the way we look at things, and almost think, oh, that's terrible, but there's nothing I can do about it, right? And we kind of say, oh, it's not my problem, and we try and put things off. But by actively becoming involved and even creating media is one of the best ways to increase our media literacy skills. Is by becoming more involved in the creation of something, you understand it better, right? That's why a lot of times in school we talk about hands-on learning rather than just me teaching from a PowerPoint or something like that.
Yes.
Because kids learn better. All of us, we actually learn better by doing.
By doing.
And so that's what, by getting people involved and creating media. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to go out and do a show like this and everything, or has to run their own newspaper, but, by making your own posts and, creating your own content online to share with people, you become more aware of what goes into it and how it can be manipulated or biased.
Yes, that is such a good idea. So that rather than simply moving away, shutting it all off, participate in it.
Absolutely. And we need more citizen journalists to become involved.
Right.
The new wave of journalism and the way it's working most effectively to report on stories is when we have a big major report from a news outlet, and then citizens get involved and they fact check and they add more to the reporting, and then the journalist can follow up on that reporting to bring it all together into a more full and cohesive story. And that allows us to cover stories that we were missing before. Right. We weren't covering a lot of diverse topics, and that's because of a lot of our newsrooms, are very segregated communities. They're often in cities and a very well-educated populace, and so they're not necessarily in tune or in touch with the everyday person. So,
do you suppose even something as, let's call it mundane, not mundane, but easy as a letter to the editor of one's newspaper, perhaps commenting about something like this, spreading the information that we think has been distorted, trying to correct it, is that a small step?
Absolutely. I think more people should get involved, and a letter to the editor is a great first step, and a great way to kind of get involved, especially with your local news.
Yes.
We know here in Falmouth, right, the Falmouth Enterprise is publishing letters and stuff that people send in. But it's also major newspapers like the New York Times and Washington Post, right? They do editorials, and a lot of times we get in trouble with some of that content because it's so opinion-based. But it's important to know people's opinions and to bring those together with facts and try and create a more full, rounded narrative.
Yes. Now, something that's really new to me that I had no idea was happening is something that you had mentioned to me earlier about photographs that we might see, or screenshots on our computers or on television, that sometimes photographs of people may not be authentic.
Absolutely.
Now, so what should we watch for there to know whether or not that's really a photo that was taken of those people rather than something that's been doctored? What shall we look for?
Yeah, so we call those deep fakes, and what we're looking for a lot of time with deep fakes to determine if they're real or not is watching the face. A lot of times the AI algorithms that people are using to create these usually struggle with hair and shadows and lighting conditions. Another thing that they have a problem with is they're machines, right? So they think about things in regular patterns and intervals. So if you notice when you're watching a video that someone blinks directly exactly once a second, literally you could set a metronome by it, then you know it was probably made by an algorithm or an AI, because people aren't machines. We don't do that. A lot of ways you can tell with like Obama clips, those were very popular to deepfake several years ago. We could tell very easily by those because they would leave out a lot of the facial emotions and expressions that he would use. And as we all know from watching him for 8 years as president, he's a very animated speaker,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And no one would ever accuse him of lacking in expression. And so those are some ways that we can tell. Another thing is machines don't pause in their speech. They'll just constantly move on. They forget that humans need to breathe. So, that's one thing that you can look for. Are they pausing to take a breath? While you can build that into your AI to build in these pauses, once again, like the blinking, they're going to be regulated every single time. You can set your watch by these things. It's incredible.
So, well then, why is it important for us to make this, to find out, to make sure that this is original and not a deep fake?
Well, I have just seen recently there's been deep fakes of Joe Biden out there. There's deep fakes we saw the deep fakes of Donald Trump getting arrested a couple weeks ago. And so people are releasing these to try and trigger outrage and stuff among people and get them to watch more and click more and become more engaged with these platforms. But it also serves certain people's interests, right? To get their base all riled up like this.
This is going to be really critical when it comes to voting.
Right. With the election right around the corner, it's something.
Yes. So that we're persuading people to behave in a certain way, to vote in a certain way. So we really need to be careful about not just text in newspapers, but pictures on TV.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's all being created a lot of times by these AI and algorithms, and people are working together with them to create this information. And using simple apps, you can do this all on your phone nowadays. Whereas before you might need some big supercomputer to do something that is pretty convincing. And another thing that you can look for when you're looking at these is to look at the quality. Because a lot of times the AI videos will make themselves in a very low quality, and that's to hide the imperfections. So if there's a high quality version available, you can notice them much easier.
I see. So the low quality will be a little bit cloudy, perhaps.
Right, and it's usually a pretty dead giveaway because nowadays our video quality is pretty high, right?
Yeah,
we have a lot of 4K, 8K,
Yeah.
incredible video technology out there. Our iPhones shoot beautiful videos, and yet when you see something and it's a very terrible little thumbnail video quality with lots of static and stuff, you can probably bet there's a reason behind that.
Yes. I like something. I like your particular sentence that there can be a kind of guideline about something extraordinary.
Right.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so, when you're looking at things, especially the clickbait articles and stuff that you see online, anything that requires any extraordinary claim requires extraordinary proof.
Okay.
And so if, someone's going to claim something completely new and outrageous, then you know that you have to back that up with a lot of really hard evidence to prove your claim.
Yes, and if that evidence isn't forthcoming, then you know it's something that you can discount.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, let's get to the big question. Human minds and artificial intelligence. Is the mind still, the human mind, in your opinion, still greater than anything we can do artificially?
Absolutely. Now, I say this here in 2023, I do see that in the next decade, we may have to revisit this. The AI is just growing exponentially.
Yes.
And with Moore's Law and the
Yes.
advancement of computing, that it's just going to keep doubling.
Yeah.
And so we certainly need to keep our eyes on it. But right now, I would say that our AI is about as intelligent as a toddler. A toddler with a very nice degree, but it's very confident and very wrong about a lot of things.
Yeah. We are thinking human beings, and I think there's an aspect of our thinking that detects subtleties, and maybe we'll still be one step ahead of AI because of that. But as you say, we'll have to revisit that in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, computers are just, the more processing power we give them, the more memory we give them, the more access to information that we give these programs to train on. And part of the problem with the information we're giving them to train on is that information's flawed. So we see this a lot of times with policing and sentencing. This has become a major issue because they're trying to remove the human element and emotions from sentencing guidelines, right? But so what they're doing is they're training AIs on this, but because of historical inequities in crime data and statistics, you're so much more likely to be refused bond and things like that if you're a person of color, no matter what your crime was, because of these historical inequities.
That is
built into the data.
Yeah. And it's unjust, totally. So what you have, it seems to me what we are talking about is so important. And let's end the program by saying that viewers need to be active, thinking listeners and readers and not passive.
Yes, absolutely. Don't take out anything you see at face value.
Yes.
Follow up on it. Fact check. I can't emphasize this enough. You need to do your own fact checking because these organizations and people aren't going to do it for you.
Right.
So there's PolitiFact, there's factcheck.org, flakcheck.org for actually delving into policy and debunking some theories on that.
So there are resources that people can use.
Absolutely, and then people know about Snopes. A lot of people accuse it of being biased, which is why I recommend some of those other platforms first. But Snopes is actually, as a fact checker, an independent site.
Good.
And so Fact Check is actually run by the Annenberg Policy Center.
Ah, yes.
And so the PolitiFact is run by a nonprofit. So a lot of these are literally just there. They're not on anybody's side. They're on the truth side.
Good. So we have help in this effort to evaluate the information that we're getting.
Yeah, that's the most important thing I can say is you're not alone. We're all in this together.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you immensely for being here and for talking to us about this important subject. And viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. And I want to also thank Glenn Rowland and Marilyn Rowland for their volunteer work and helping to put this program together. And I look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with Barbara. Thank you.